You're listening to Brave Girls with Tracy Imm, where we choose to empower you to be a better leader, mentor, and coach in the world. We'll share stories of people who have achieved great heights by overcoming adversity and rising to the challenge, all while pursuing their passions. These courageous people will inspire you to have faith in yourself and take bold action. Right here with the host of Brave Girls, Tracy Imm.
Episode 16, Rethinking Possible with Rebecca Faye Smith Galli. Today's episode of Brave Girls with Tracy Imm is one of my absolute favorites. I interviewed the amazing Rebecca Faye Smith Galli, who wrote the book Rethinking Possible. If you haven't read this memoir, I'd recommend you get a copy. Her writing is prolific, inspirational, and she shares her story and thoughts on what it's like to be in a wheelchair and how to deal with grief, obstacles, and challenges that life sends our way. We talk about the writing process when you write a memoir and you're telling stories that are bigger than your life. Becky's style is captivating and draws you into the emotions of the events she's had to deal with, to include her brother's tragic death when she was 17 and her sudden paralysis. She's been able to connect with her readers through her writing. And we talk about the cycles of grief and how to allow it a place in your life that doesn't completely consume you. As Becky says, when we love deeply, we grieve deeply. We also talk about processing anger and why you shouldn't isolate in anger or grief. Becky talks about her journey as a mom and all the lessons that she's learned. She also talks about her divorce and her relationship with her ex-husband and his second wife today. On the episode, she also reads the letter that she wrote to her daughter and son-in-law on their wedding day. I'm sure you'll love the wisdom and guidance that Becky has to share in the letter. Becky's incredibly resilient, and she's living her purpose through her writing, and I know that you'll be able to learn from her on this podcast. So let's go. Welcome to Brave Girls with Tracy Imm. Today, I'm so excited that we have Becky Faye Smith Galli, author of Rethinking Possible, a memoir of resilience, with us today. She's a weekly columnist who lives in Baltimore, Maryland, and she writes about love, loss, and healing. She's a Moorhead Kane Scholar, or she was a Moorhead Kane Scholar at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Then she was employed at IBM, where she was the recipient of their Gold Circle Award for Marketing Excellence. She survived many significant losses. Her 17-year-old brother, his death, her son's degenerative disease and subsequent death, her daughter's autism, her divorce, and 9 days later, her paralysis from transverse myelitis, which is a rare spinal cord inflammation that began as the flu. And this has then launched her into an unexpected but prolific writing career. So welcome to the show, Becky. I'm so glad to have you on the show and get to hear your story and share your story with our listeners.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here.
Great. So I know I also subscribe to your Thoughtful Thursday emails, and I think that they're really, really inspirational, where you really try and inspire people to stay positive as you are out in the world, living your life, your new life, really, since for several years now. So tell us a little bit about how you came to write your book.
That's a good question and a lengthy question, because it probably took me, I was counting 20 years. Sometimes I'll say my book is almost old enough to have a drink, because she's almost 21 years old. But it really started out of necessity to communicate with people after my paralysis. So I was a sales and marketing gal. I had 4 active children. My divorce had been final 9 days, and then this strange affliction, transverse myelitis, hit me, and in 6 hours I was paralyzed. So at the time I was very hopeful that I would regain full function, a third recover fully, a third recover partially, and a third recover not at all. But I was determined to be in at least the top 2/3. But meanwhile, I had these kids. My kids were 3, 4, 6, and 9 years old at the time. I had these kids, this active life, but I was in a wheelchair, and it was really, really hard for me to connect as I as I used to. So that was 1997, about the time email was coming into play here. So I had somebody gave me a computer and loaded up arrows, and I figured out that I could email people about my life. And that really kind of launched a regular writing. This is way before blogs. I would collect people's emails and email each one of them. I finally figured out how to do a distribution list. But they were very personal to me. I would talk about what it was like to be out and about in a wheelchair, what it was like to try to play soccer with my son from the wheelchair, who was still wanting me to be mom. So those columns, somebody said, you know what, Becky, I think you could create one of those for be an op-ed in the Baltimore Sun. So I submitted it, and it was that one about playing soccer with my son, and they published it. So that publishing, I was shocked. I mean, my dad had his own newspaper column, and he was so funny. He said, Becky, you made it above the fold. I didn't even know what that meant, but apparently if you're above the fold, that's a good thing. So I was
absolutely. You have arrived.
So with the byline and everything. So that started, thought, well, I could do this from the wheelchair. I can't go out and do sales and marketing, but I could do this. And it connected me with friends and family all over the world. So people would pass them along and read them and pass them to other people. And soon I've had like 400 people that were reading these emails. So after the published column, I submitted it to a local weekly, and that began a monthly column from where I sit at a Baltimore weekly that lasted 12 years. And then when my dad died, he wanted me to continue his newspaper column in West Virginia. So I did that. And then I did my daughter with autism. I did a column about her transitioning to adulthood. So with all these columns, I wound up, somebody said, maybe this should be a book. And I said, well, so many crazy things have happened to me. Nobody's going to believe it anyway. So I might as well get the facts straight and get it in a format that I like and tell my story my way.
Yeah. And I love that you did your certificate of creative nonfiction at Stanford in 2012 to 2014. So talk about that and how that, really propelled you in terms of learning how to tell stories and really, honing your craft.
Exactly. And I think that was a difficult period. My son was in his senior year in high school. My daughter had just gotten engaged. So it was a crazy time. But I really, when you write a 500-word column, is a lot different than writing a book. And over those 20 years, the book had many forms. One time it was a journal of hope and determination, which was email journals. It was a self-help book at one point. But I went to a writer's conference and got strong feedback that this really is a memoir. And so to do memoir, I took this class, and it was tough. It was really tough learning how to tell not only, my story, 500 words at a time in a column format, but you had to have this thing they called a narrative arc, where you had to tell a story that was bigger than your life. So that really made me rethink exactly what is the story, what have I learned, and you had to really look at yourself as a character Becky, and what were her strengths, what were her weaknesses, and how did she transform, and only include life events that helped in that transformation. So there was a lot of whittling out and creating in that 2 years, but that was critical in getting it to the shape it needed to be for publication.
Yeah, well, I read it. It was a gift to me from you through Marianne Singer as part of her women's coach experience down in New Orleans. And I read it on the plane ride home, and I couldn't put it down because your writing style I was so drawn in. I felt like I knew you, and I felt like I was feeling your emotions as you were writing what was happening to you, the good and the bad, the ups and the downs. And I always feel like that's the sign of a great memoir writer, is when I feel like I know you. And I definitely was like, I have got to meet her. I've got to, you are amazing as a writer and as a person and a human, to be able to, go through so when you write, you have gone through it, but then when you write, you have to go through it all again,
Oh,
right?
yes.
And so you have to be able to process all of those emotions all over again, and sometimes it's messy. So how did you cope with that as you were kind of like reshaping, doing the narrative arc and all of that, you know?
It was difficult, but my sister, Rachel, who's 4 years younger, was a great support. She lives in Georgia. I'm here in Baltimore. And I would tell her, I'm going to be writing this scene of our brother's death, So my father had written a book about his son's death, my Forrest's death. So I had a lot of factual information from there, because that was a long time ago. This was 1978, is when he died. And so, but I told Rachel, I said, I'm revisiting this. I'm getting into the mode. I'm trying to remember what we felt, what it looked like, the conversation, snippets of it. And I would tell her, I'm going to write for 8 hours. I'm going to come out at the other end. I need you to be there to talk to me at the end to make sure I do come out of it, because you're wallowing in fresh grief all over again. So that structure of, I know it's going to be a tough day. I've got, and I had all my supports, my Starbucks coffee and the high tuna for protein and all the things I know that would fuel me, so that I could get down in there and really relive some of the hardest times in my life. But I wanted them to be real to people, and I wanted to share that because, it's we all go through life as we difficult things in life. It's not as we planned, right?
Correct.
One of my dad's favorite sayings that I live by is, "What's planned is possible." And I really do believe that. But man, there's a lot of things that are impossible when you get down to get it. You don't think your life is going to take this turn. So I hope it would be a book of encouragement, because it's possible to get through tough times. I mean, I learned so much about myself writing it, and it's connected me with other people who've shared their stories that have encouraged me. Somebody's always got a story, and it's amazing how many are life-changing,
Right. Well, one of my favorite lines in your book ever was, "Grief is a strange companion." That really hit me. Having gone through, I had my brother-in-law died unexpectedly, my father died unexpectedly, and then a couple months later, one of my friends died unexpectedly. So I had three things really in a row, and it doesn't get any easier, but it is a strange companion. And so talk a little bit about what you've learned, because you've had similar situation with your children, your brother, your family. So what is it? Just you recognize things and you can get through them quicker, like kind of the stages of grief, or it's never easy.
Right. And I, in my experience, everybody's different with it, but my experience, there weren't really stages of grief. There were more of these cycles of grief, and that I had to allow grief a place in my life. I tried not to, I call them, if you imagine a closet with shelves, it's not down on the racks that I use all the time. It's up there, but it's got a place, because in a way, I think when we love deeply, we're going to grieve deeply for the rest of our lives in some way. We just don't want that to be absorbing and in the center of our lives all the time. But when it comes to visit, it's like it's a friend that's come back. You see a butterfly reminds me of my brother, and or you see a certain kind of ice cream reminds me of my father, and a certain color of lipstick of my mother, and it's right there. And so often I had tried to push it away, and it's like, no, just don't think about it. And then now it's like, it's almost revered. It's like, oh yes, she loved Cherryberry Brew lipstick. And that just, you knew mother was on at her best when she had her lipstick on. And if she didn't have her lipstick on, you knew something was probably really wrong, because she didn't say that much, but that was her signature. So I do respect grief, and it makes it not easier, but at least it's kind of predictable that you're going to have bouts, especially when you have a series like you went through. Sometimes it's hard to get up before you're knocked down again.
Yes. I like what you said, though. I respect grief. That's a good way to think about it. The other thing that, I liked that was in your book was some of the things that you talked about and how to deal with anger. And so, talk about that and how you process through that emotion, because that's also it's kind of a messy emotion, but to stuff it down, then that's not good either.
Right. And I think, there's a scene that I write about at my brother's funeral that I was actually angry at him for dying on me. How dare you die on me? And that's just not a real typical response in fresh grief. I was 20 years old. My 17-year-old brother died. He wasn't looking where he was going. He was waving to people. He hit a piling. He lived for 9 days, and then he died. And I was just devastated. But at the same time, and the last thing he wrote on his college application was, "I would change nothing." And you just, how could that be the last thing that he wrote? And it just triggered all of this. I would have changed so many things, and now you've left me to miss you the rest of my life. And I was angry that he wasn't paying attention, and I think we have to, it's another one of these acknowledgement of our humanity, that we have these emotions. And I think people don't like to talk about it, but my advice is always find somebody that'll listen to you talk about it, because the worst thing is to isolate. When you isolate in anger or you isolate in grief, you're digging a pit. You need to always talk about, get people in the boat with you that are going to help you through whatever storm you're going through. And if they can be an asset to you, great, welcome them. If for some reason they're negative, you can graciously uninvite them, because you need people to strengthen you when you're going through a tough time. And our friends have different attributes, and some of them work well in some situations and don't in others. And then sometimes we're just so numb with the whole thing. You just want to sit with somebody, just to have a being place where you can
right.
be in a space with somebody else. So.
Right. So you had the tragic death of your brother. He was water skiing, right? Right. And then you have a son that had a degenerative disease that also then passed away. So what was that like, being a mother having to bury their child? I mean, that's just not natural, right?
It was very difficult, because it's another one of those unknown. When I pressed the doctor for what's wrong with Matthew, at 3 months of age, he began with seizures. He was the second born, and so the monitor lit up at night with these strange gurgling sounds, and I went in to find him kind of frozen in this Superman posture, and they thought it was a night terror. And so it happened again, and it happened again. Finally, I videoed it and took it to a pediatric neurologist, and he told us it was a seizure. And then he didn't start developing properly. He couldn't sit. He wound up being tube fed. So when I pressed for what is this, the paperwork I got back said it was an undiagnosed disease of the central nervous system. I'm like, well, I've just got a bad doctor. I just need to find somebody that can diagnose it. And the truth is, nobody could. They didn't know what was wrong. And it was kind of an introduction to doctors that don't know. And it's like with my transverse myelitis, they don't know the cause of that. With Madison's autism, they don't know the cause of that. So it was this big learning of, sometimes we have to learn to live with the questions, and we just have to accept, okay, we're not going to know this, but what life can I have despite this?
Right.
So when Matthew died, he was 15 years old, but he functioned at a 4-month level. I think that grief was a kind of a chronic grief because every milestone he didn't hit, you kind of mourned that. But he died on the same day as my mom, which was another one of these weird things. She died in one area of the country from one cause, and he died 6 hours later in another. And
wow.
You just have to wonder at the mystery of it all. But I think, he had the best life he could. And as a mother, I think I can honestly say I did the best I could with
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
So that was tough grief.
Yeah, I know. And it's also hard. I have friends who have children with different conditions that when they don't hit those milestones and they've got brothers and sisters that are either older or younger than them who are progressing developmentally, and that's very difficult for both the parents and the siblings.
Yes.
And then your daughter, she was born after that and she has autism?
Yes. So Madison, she's 26 now, was diagnosed with autism at a young age. Because of Matthew's lack of progression, I was kind of sensitized to 3 months, 6 months. And when she didn't start babbling like she should, I got her tested right away. And we had early intervention with her. And as a result of some of her schooling, we met classmates that also, these parents had questions, and we formed Pathfinders for Autism, which is a nonprofit that's still going gangbusters now after 18 years. And
that's fantastic.
20,000 individuals each year, but it was out of this need to find good information on how to be good parents for our children. And parents were sharing stories, and I'm like, hey, let's just do a repository. Let's share our stories that can help one another.
Right.
But yep. So hers is an ongoing. She isn't very high functioning with autism. She doesn't read or write or speak willingly. She has scripted speech she uses for things. So it's been a challenge to get good care for her through the years, and will probably always be. Right.
But again, living the best life that she can possibly live.
And that's
is
my goal for her.
Yeah, that's achievable, and I think it's a realistic goal too. So then, kind of moving forward in your story, then part of your book you talk about your divorce, and this was somebody that you had dated in college at UNC, and you thought this is going to be forever and ever.
Right. He was the man of my dreams. It was. And we got married, and we both wanted big families, and we had 4 children, 2 girls, 2 boys. But it was a lot, between Matthew and then Madison, and then my youngest son, when he was born, had a very rare disorder called alloimmune thrombocytopenia, which made him very much at risk for spontaneous bleeds. That could have been disabling for him. Unfortunately, he didn't have it, and so, I mean, he has thrived. But in that process, we lost each other. Joe and I just lost each other in that, and we couldn't make it work. We wanted to. We had counseling for 3 years, but there just came a point where we weren't who we needed to be for each other. And so we divorced, and on good terms. He's still very much in my life now. He was so supportive after the paralysis with the children. And we've done I think, pretty good job
co-parenting now, right?
Co-parenting and really caring for one another. We really do care about each other in our long-term.
So you're actually in a good space.
Yeah,
you're in a really good space. Yeah. And then, he got remarried, and you talk about that. And, and I was just sort of like, wow, like, do you have the relationship with the new wife? Not, and given all the circumstances of everything that was going on with your children, it was, you were like, yeah, I'm going to form a relationship with her. And
I have to give them both credit too, because what second wife wants the first wife heavily involved in their new life.
Mm-hmm.
And she was very open to that, and she truly loved the children and wanted the best for them as well. And we even vacationed together every Labor Day. We're all together. They had another child, and our children get along great, and I'm included on that and grateful for that. And so Joe's kind of a saint to have his first wife and his second wife and the children. We all just get along.
You make it work.
And I really wanted that for my children too, because I think it's easier on the kids growing up if they see the parents get along well and really care for one another and about each other.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I had kind of the opposite experience with my parents' divorce. So I write about that in my second book, about the shame that I had around the divorce and the dysfunction around when we would all be thrown back together, when there's, a graduation, a wedding, a christening, the sort of typical family. Everybody's going to be there because they're so excited there's some achievement or whatever. But then it was like just dreading when that was going to come and thinking this can't be over soon enough. So, I mean, that's really good that was so important to you guys.
Oh, well, thank you. It's hard to do, but it's worth it. For me, it was worth doing. It was worth
right.
Doing that, so
right. So there's another part in your book where you write a letter. Was it to your daughter and future husband or your son? Yeah. So talk about that.
Excuse me?
Talk about that. Talk about that daughter and the letter.
Well, it was interesting at the wedding, your mother of the bride, and one of my college buddies who had, received my emails. I've been doing the email list for years and been writing the columns for years. And she says, Becky, you're not going to say anything at the wedding? And well, no, you're not really allowed. And the mother, at least the protocol at that time, who knows what it's so changing so fast. But no, you're not really allowed. But I thought what I would do, she got me thinking, like, what would I say if I were toasting them or had something to say? And so I wrote a letter to them. And so I have that letter. I want you
to read it. Yeah, please do.
So Brittany's my daughter's name, and Brian was her husband-to-be, and they're now happily married, and I have 2 grandchildren. But this is how what I wrote to them. For Brittany and Brian, first of all, I want you to know how happy I am for the 2 of you. My heart is bursting with joy for you now, the young couple so much in love, and for the couple of the future, sure to be filled with the deep abiding care for one another that I see in you now. The scripture reading selected for your wedding has it right. Of faith, hope, and love, the greatest of these is love. Here is what I want to say to both of you on this, your wedding day. It is my daily hope and prayer for you. Brittany and Brian, from this moment on, you will face life together as you have never faced it before. You are a couple committed to one another for life. It is a special, sacred commitment. I hope you can find guidance from this one simple thought. Let your love be larger. Let your love be larger than adversity, than issues, than people or circumstances that threaten to pull you apart. Let it prevail, triumph, overcome. Release the urge to be right, the urge to win, the urge to remember each time you have been right and won, and let your love be larger. Love is all the things the good book tells us, patient, kind, understanding, but it is also the most powerful force we have. Use it wisely, cherish it, sustain it, and nurture it. Before you act, ask, is it kind? Is it necessary? Is it loving? And always let your love be larger. And as your circle of friends and family expand, let love teach you that it has more than one way to be expressed, that judging others' loving ways is a useless exercise. A more important action is to let your love be larger and learn from it. What can a different expression of love teach you about others? Respect it, honor it, and open your heart a little wider to include it, even though it may be so foreign to you. And with your children, remember that they are a result of your love for one another. Your love came first, then your shared love for them. Let love overshadow the small stuff, embellish the large stuff, and wrap a layer of warmth around the cold realities that you may face. Love is what we're meant to do, you know, share our lives with one another. Love can't fix all of life's hard times, but it sure can make whatever journey you are on richer, fuller, and most importantly, shared. Love each other despite, because you can, and always let your love be larger.
Oh, that's just beautiful.
Thank you. Thank
I
you.
mean, that is just such good wisdom and guidance, and you know, I love it. I mean, it's just absolutely beautiful.
Thank you. You know, it's really a kind of a culmination of what I've learned through the hardships, is that so often I think we try to win. We try to fight and win. And sometimes the better thing to do is just accept it for what it is and learn to live with it instead of trying to beat it. And I think that's kind of what Rethinking Possible means, you know, to accept a situation and rethink what is still possible in that situation. I didn't choose the title. In fact, it was like the eighth one on a list of that my publisher had given me.
Mm-hmm.
But after I let it settle in, it's like, yeah, that's what you do. That's what you do when you're faced with the life you didn't plan, is you rethink what's possible with it.
Right. Right. Yeah. And so one of the things we're going to do is we're going to put your book club kit and a link to your book on the show notes so people can find the book. Like I said, I thought it was fabulous. I can't wait for your next one to come out because I couldn't get enough of it. And I've told so many people that I think that there's just so many nuggets and gems that you write about from experience, just life experience, and you know, how you are now living with a completely different circumstance than what you had envisioned. And even back in 1978, as things were, you know, you were in college and, you know, with your ex-husband at the time, with your brother, and you know, you didn't think that was going to be your plan, and yet you've been able to figure it out and, you know, create and craft a life that, you know, is going to work for you now. So, you know, you're just, you know, when I was putting together the idea to have this podcast, I was like, you were like at the top of my list, because I was like, this woman has just, you're so resilient and you're so just fun and positive, and you know, really making things work, and you know, it's like you're living your purpose through your writing and your speaking, and you know, the work that you're doing in so many different areas, whether it's autism or you know, just community or through your church, and so you know, you just accepted what's your situation is, and now you're like, okay, now what am I doing, and now where am I going, and how can I, you know, be the best grandmother, be the best mother, be the best, you know, first wife, and on and on and on. So, you know, my finale question is always, what's the bravest thing that you've ever done, and how does it inspire you today? And for you, I can't even imagine what you're going to say.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, and you know, this is going to be a surprising one, but it's and I didn't write about this, but it's 3 years ago. I was asked to come back to the Moorhead Cane Forum and present on a panel. There was a few of us, and the topic was Winston Churchill's words: "When you're going through hell, keep going." And we all were supposed to talk through about our hell and what we'd gone through. And it was a marvelous panel. But I had never been in front of a live audience talking about my challenges. I'd written about it for 20 years. And you can always go back and edit and, rewrite and get opinions. And these were live people going to be asking me questions, and I was scared to death. So the book was in the works. It wasn't anywhere, I was probably in the middle of that Stanford class actually when I went back. But I decided, you know what, I had my Thoughtful Thursdays. I'm going to prepare for this. And so I sent an email out to my Thoughtful Thursday list. And I said, look, I'm trying to prepare for this. I'm supposed to be talking about my paralysis. You all know my life. Many of you have been on this list for 20 years. You know my life. If you were in the live audience, what questions would you ask me so I can get used to that? So that was great. People asked me all different kinds and then questions. And then I practiced. I had live practice with some friends, but I was still scared to death because you can't predict in a live audience. You just can't. And so I went, and the night before I did not sleep. It was one of those, back then I had this armband, and it would monitor how much you'd slept the night before so you could see your sleep patterns. And so I got that the next day, and it was like I did not sleep at all, and I had the evidence. Actually, there's a post on that shows how much I didn't sleep the night before. But once I got going, and people were curious, but it was a warmth to their questions, a respect to their questions, and it really energized me in a way never before, because when you write, it goes out and maybe somebody will write you back, but there's nothing like eyeball contact when you say something and they're like, oh my gosh, that hit, that meant something to that person. So it wound up being one of the best experiences ever. And what that taught me in going forward is, again, I was afraid. I got people in the boat with me that could help me. I prepared, and then I went for it, So that I think is the best example I could think of, because I still do that same process now, I try to prepare for you. I got my things together for you. I've got another one going back in the fall to present to be a keynote kind of person in one of the topics there. And that'll be in front of a really big audience. And so that's okay. You just get your resources, rehearse, practice, and,
Mm-hmm. Well, and after you are over that initial fear, I would assume that the more you do it,
yes,
the more your fear subsides. And it's great that they were so warm and kind to you, and which you probably had in your head, these questions are going to come out of left field, but that's great. And I think it was smart on your part to throw it out to your email newsletter list to say, hey, I'm going to do this. What kinds of questions, because then you at least have a frame of reference of where people are going and what they're thinking. So you can prepare and feel a little more confident that, well, I know how to answer that question.
Exactly. And at this point, I've done it so many times, it's a lot easier to prepare, but the process is the same. You want to envision your audience and make sure that you've thought through what would make sense to them or what would be best for them to hear.
Mm-hmm. So what is next in terms of your writing? Are you going to write a second book, or what's kind of in your future?
I do want to do another book. I'm just not sure what I had with these columns that I had written. I had thought about maybe doing some kind of daily, and I have a daily quiet time where I read in the morning and reflect and write. I thought, well, maybe, and I love quotes. That's one of the things that I spent extra time with on the book, is not only the chapter title, but a quote that's associated with it that helped me get through that. So to really hone in on that piece of what quotes sustain me, and to
yes.
So that's kind of one book idea, which is more like a kind of a day book kind of thing. And then the other one is to go at the broader topic, which is losing without losing it.
That's a good one too.
Because people seem really interested in the kind of the mechanics of that, of, when you stop asking why and you move to how, how do you get your mind going in that direction instead of spinning in this isn't fair and
why did this happen? And right.
So, but I need a good chunk of time to just do that, and I haven't found it yet. I'm still working on that part.
Well, thank you for carving out time today to be on the show, and I know our listeners are really going to enjoy it. So I wish you the best of luck. Whatever you publish, I'm going to read it, and I'm sure now you're going to find some new fans once we put this out on the podcast and people know about you and they know your story and they know your book. And just in case folks have a book club, Becky does do virtual book club meetings with folks that are interested through Skype. So I think that's a great option too. And if they're local to the Baltimore area, it's possible that she could even do an in-person gathering, which I think is fantastic. People love that kind of stuff, being able to meet the author.
And I've been able to go at a few libraries, that have book clubs affiliated with libraries, or even book clubs that want to meet at a library. The libraries kind of reinvented themselves as a real gathering place for community. Yes. So that's another option too. I think I got 3 of those scheduled in the fall. So,
that's great. That's great. All right.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Brave Girls with Tracy Imm as much as I did creating it. Each show is produced with you, the listener, in mind, as you look for inspiration and motivation from other brave souls as you pursue your desires. I'd love to hear your feedback, so please leave me a review on iTunes. I read every one. And check out my website, tracyimm.com, for more free resources. You can also join my list and sign up for my newsletter right from the homepage. Until next time, stay strong, believe in your dreams, and go do something brave.
We appreciate you joining us for this episode of Brave Girls with Tracy Imm and hope that you enjoyed the show. For more information about today's episode, as well as additional free resources to help you achieve greatness in your life, visit tracyimm.com and sign up for our mailing list. Until next time, dream big, believe in yourself, and let your brilliance shine as only you can do.